Jiyan is one of the many characters to come back during 2.3, and he will be on the first half. As the first ever limited 5-star, is Jiyan still worth pulling for? Well, that's what I'm going to be discussing in this video, by talking about Jiyan's biggest pros and cons. First of all, the biggest thing that I would like to say that is in Jiyan's favor is the fact that he is strong in not just the Whimpering Wastes, but also the Tower of Adversity. Ever since the 2.1 update, Jiyan has found a new usage as one of the best DPS characters for all of Whimpering Wastes, and this did not compromise his ability to clear the Tower of Adversity. Because we have two endgame modes, both of which requiring multiple teams, the most efficient pulls are the ones that are able to deal with both of the game modes incredibly swimmingly, and Jiyan is one of the characters I believe does this the best. This is because the two game modes are both requiring very different aspects of a character. Whimpering Waste values AoE, consistent damage output, and grouping, whereas the Tower of Adversity demands you have a high damage output and good grasp of skill in the game. Tower is a lot less selective when it comes to the qualities a character needs, and thus Tower is, in my opinion, less important than the Whimpering Wastes, which is why the fact that Jiyan is essentially perfect for wuwa is, in my opinion, his biggest upside. Not only does he have enough AoE to easily deal with the small mobs, I'd even say he's the best character in the game for small mobs, he also has the damage output and consistency to take care of elites and make sure that he can clear wave after wave during just one ult duration. This ability to perform strongly in Whimpering Wastes, while still easily passing the DPS checks of Tower, just makes him an incredibly good pull for any account that is yet to get their bearings on both modes. The second thing I want to talk about is the fact that Jiyan is currently the best Aero DPS in the game. While I have gone on record saying that element is not that important in Wuthering Waves, there is still some value in having diversity in your roster. It's not like element is completely useless in this game. After all, bosses have different resistances, so you would prefer to be in a scenario in which your account cannot be easily countered. And this is done by simply pulling for different element DPS characters. It's really just that simple, and Aero is obviously one of the elements in the game. So getting the best Aero DPS in the entire game is a very valuable trait if you're simply trying to get diversity out of your roster. If you're only going to play Spectro characters, you'll essentially be cooked the second that the Tower of Adversity doesn't like Spectro anymore. And since 2.0 introduced resistance increases in Tower as well, you need to make sure you have enough elements so you can truly and properly counter the Tower's effects. And thus getting multiple DPS characters on multiple elements is something I consider to be extremely valuable. The next thing I want to talk about is the fact that Jiyan has a very unique property as a DPS, being the fact that he has incredible suction effects. Take that however you will. Whenever Jiyan is in his ultimate state and is using his Qinglong attacks, he has the ability to gather smaller enemies and make them unable to escape his grasp, which, again, take that as you will. The ability to just suck up enemies and turn them into what is essentially a non-threat is something that I consider to be especially valuable in Whimpering Wastes. In this game mode, you have three types of enemy waves. Primarily small enemies, which is where a lot of DPSs get just completely annihilated. Then there's multiple elites at a time, and then there's elites and small mobs at the same time. Jiyan having this suction ability means he can take care of the small mobs incredibly easily, because, well, he'll simply just suck them up and dispatch them easily, especially since enemies spawn in the same place when in wuwa. So if you just stand there and hold your attack button, these small enemies essentially do not have a singular chance to escape your grasp. Jiyan is just an incredible character for crowd controlling those small mobs. And let me tell you, they can pose a threat sometimes. When there's like 10 wolves biting at you all at once, you're going to pray you weren't playing Phoebe and getting interrupted all the time. So Jiyan just turning them into a non-factor is incredible. There's also the fact that Jiyan has pretty good range for a melee character. Most melee characters want to just sit in the enemy's face, And to be fair, while Jiyan is not very different, he is still different enough from those that I would say it's a pretty good advantage for a melee character. He doesn't have the traditional range that Carlotta or Phoebe do, where he can attack enemies from a distance. Instead, what I mean is that his hitboxes are fairly far away from him when he is in his ultimate state. This means that even when he is standing in the middle of a group of enemies, almost everyone is going to be hit by his attacks, which is again very valuable in Whimpering Wastes, where you're often dealing with large clusters of enemies. Jiyan's attacks being in an essentially 360-degree loop around him allows him to just kind of sit there and hold the attack button like I said in the previous point. This ability to just kind of exist and make enemies a non-factor is an incredible convenience that a lot of people value. So if you are someone who wants to just make AoE content their absolute slave, Jiyan might just be the pick for you. But of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and Jiyan definitely has some issues. Starting with the fact that Jiyan's energy regen is what I like to call volatile. Now, what do I mean with his energy needs are volatile? That's a pretty vague statement. Well, let me explain. Energy is incredibly important in Withering Waves, especially so for certain DPS characters due to their damage being almost entirely locked behind their ultimate state, and Jiyan is no different from this. But where Jiyan differs from all these other characters is that almost all of his attacks are multi-hits. Now, why is this such a big deal? Other characters have multi-hits too, like Shang Liao. Well, Jiyan's a little different, because literally everything he does is a multi-hit, and every single hit of it is just as important as the last. This means that every single hit of his attacks generates the same amount of energy. So there is no real room for error when you're playing Jiyan and you're trying to generate energy. Because if you miss even like 2 hits of your multi-hits, that's going to be a pretty big dent into his energy. So if you're fighting an enemy that likes to run away from you, you have the chance of running into the issue where you don't have enough energy for your next rotation, because you just did not hit enough of your multi-hits in order to actually get your full ult. And to expand on this, there's the second con, which is just because he's a melee character, he hates it when the enemy runs away from him. Obviously, there are plenty of other melee DPSs, however they have some way to get around it. For example, Shang Liao just kind of drags himself across the floor if the enemy is too far away, or Chong-Li does not have a strict rotation time, so she's able to attack whenever she feels it's needed. But because Jiyan is on such a strict timer for his ultimate, any time the enemy spends running away from you or being invulnerable is precious time off of your rotation completely wasted that you could have spent doing damage, and there's no way to recover from this. Most DPSs use a resource for their damage, but Jiyan just uses a straight up timer, making him a lot more prone to time wasting enemies. And while we haven't seen it as much recently in Tower, there is definitely a few bosses that Jiyan does not like to fight. The Inferno Rider is one of them, having a pretty long invulnerability phase, as well as liking moving away from you. And while we're on the topic of bosses moving away from you, oh boy, what do you think of Impermanence Heron, eh? And that's not the end of it, because while we haven't seen Sentry Construct in Tower yet, trust me, he's coming, and when he does, Jiyan is probably not going to be a fan. But what do you think of Jiyan? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord, which is linked in the description. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask your question in there, there's a pretty good chance I'll respond. But that'll be it from me. Peace.